He's kind of like the Joe Rogan of the hospitality industry right now.
People are captive in a lot of situations. The banking industry and debt specifically has made people slaves to that debt. And my vision is to set people free from that, to be able to use the system, use the tools against themselves for the benefit of the people that I serve, ultimately putting them on a path to live beyond money. I want people to be able to live out a calling. And so the thing that gives me the most energy is not when I get a client to get an amazing return in their portfolio. I like that. It feels good. But it's even better when they come to me with a goal that feels so outside of the purview of just normal returns in a portfolio, protecting my family if something happens to me. I have a client right now. I have this dream. I want to have a second home and it's got a biking track on it. We want to be able to invite people onto the property. We want to grow our own food. Like I hear people talking like that. I'm like, that is what gives me energy, is to be able to help somebody fulfill that thing that's so outside of what our industry would normally do.
You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. Welcome back, Slick Talkers, and I'm so excited to introduce to you my friend Shane Bauman, who is an amazing entrepreneur who helps other entrepreneurs financially succeed and get out of the mindset of the amount of debt or basically poor financial practices that consume them and limit their dreams and the execution of that. And if you have noticed, the show has changed a little bit, and there's going to be a future bonus episode coming out probably next week around the show's structure, as Slick Talk has been around for almost 7 years this March. And we want to change the format a little bit. We want to go a little bit deeper in certain areas. I want to also expand outside of just hospitality. I love business, entrepreneurship, and personal growth. I've gone through a pretty significant personal journey in this last couple months. Again, more to share in the bonus episode coming out later. But this episode was fun. It was different. It was outside of the hospitality space that we're, used to talking in all the time. And so I hope as an entrepreneur, if you're a business owner, listener of this show who does more or wants to do more outside of hospitality, this episode is going to be great for you. And I hope you enjoy Shane's story, his advice, and of course, the depth and knowledge that he has in financial services and of course, building a dream. I had the pleasure of being on Shane's podcast, which was so much fun. So make sure to grab that link in the show notes if you want to hear more of my story that I haven't shared on other podcasts in the hospitality space. So without further ado, let's move on to the episode. All right, Shane, I can't believe we're not doing this podcast in person, but when in Rome and the day and age of digital recording, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. I'm excited to be on.
Yes. Well, obviously, got to give the listeners a quick heads up that as they heard in the intro, I was on your podcast, Building the Biz, and talking about the journey of obviously building what I built. But I figured what a great opportunity to have you on the show, as a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs, business owners, running multiple businesses, if not, running one business, if not multiple. And so, I think this is a perfect episode to kind of shine the light into just the business world. And as a lot of the listeners have seen the changes on Slick Talk on Apple and Spotify, we're no longer Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. It's Slick Talk, hospitality, business, and entrepreneurship. We're going to go into multiple topics in and outside of the industry. So you're the first guest that's the official outsider of the industry. So we're really excited.
No pressure.
No pressure. No, but it's good. You have a lot of business knowledge and wealth, and I want to talk about that through kind of your experience working with clients at Rise and just the experience you've had over the many years of running business and being involved in business. And you were just in Dallas at a conference, kind of learning and doing all the fun stuff. So Yeah, let's jump into it. I want to kind of hear where your true story begins when it gets into entrepreneurship and opening up your own company.
Yeah, probably the best place to start is I kind of tell this story of the two dads that I grew up with. I grew up with, I had a stepdad and a biological dad. My stepdad was a farmer, very much, gosh, talk about a risk taker and an entrepreneur. I think farmers, they take on crazy risk and they have such limited control. And one of the things I loved about kind of watching my stepdad as I grew up was, man, he had control over his calendar. Outside of like their seasons in the summer where he was just working bell to bell, he had a lot more control over his calendar, a lot more control over kind of his own business. And I saw that and I was really drawn to it. My grandpa, by the way, was also a farmer. So he was a melon farmer in the southern part of the state, and just kind of this larger than life guy. And my dad and I are actually really different. He's a very 9-to-5 guy. He grew up doing the daily grind. I mean, I learned a ton about work ethic from my dad, but I watched him do that 9-to-5 all the time and just like having no control over it. And I was like, ugh. And so, I came out of college. I didn't really know kind of which, I didn't really think about it. You kind of come out of school and you're like, hey, I see you get a job. I always thought I wanted to be the CEO of some corporation. And as I entered the workforce, I quickly realized that, working the corporate grind was like lighting myself on fire. I quickly realized that. And so, I bounced around and did some sales things for a while. I was at a title insurance company in the early 2000s. I had an opportunity to own the title insurance company, but it just wasn't, there wasn't anything sexy about title insurance. It was really highly regulated. Ironically enough, I'm in a highly regulated business now, but I did a lot of different things. I did some recruiting. I was doing some fundraising for startup companies for a while. And, I've just always kind of been that gunslinger that just has a vision to fix problems and try and create something to kind of innovate. And so I started in the financial services industry around May of 2011. And I hit the ground running. I was in a very captive environment. For your listeners that don't know what that means I was kind of limited to products that I could sell. So it was kind of quasi-entrepreneurial. I could kind of build things out the way I wanted to, but I was limited as far as my toolkit. I did that for about 4 years and I realized I need something much better. I wanted to be more of a holistic advisor. So after a couple of different iterations, working for a couple of different firms, I realized I needed to start my own thing. So January of 2019, I did that without a net, obviously not knowing that COVID was going to punch me in the face around March of 2020. And man, it's hard. Like starting a business from scratch without a rolling start is really freaking hard. I learned a lot of things. I learned what I like to do and what I don't like to do. And I've recently really embraced the idea that I have a visionary's heart, a disruptive heart. Like I want to come in and disrupt, the brokenness that I see specifically in my industry in financial services. And I'm in an environment where I now have an operational team that helps me do a lot of the operational stuff I don't enjoy doing. And I'm focusing more and more, how do I work on the business, not in the business so much? And so I'm constantly evaluating kind of my calendar, but I want to build things at an enterprise level. And that's what I'm excited to do. So as distinctly as I can put it, that's kind of a quick rundown of kind of my background and my history in being an entrepreneur.
All right, Slick Talkers, as we are talking in this episode, I want to give a proper promotion and shout out to our friends at Send Squared, our title sponsor of Slick Talk. For so long, yes, we've been collecting emails and doing all the right things when it comes to that, but we've never been actually sending out email newsletters. Mind-blowing, I know. But as I was talking to Nick after having him on the show, I realized, holy crap, we are not doing our job as a podcast network with the amount of outreach and communication and marketing with our listeners who subscribe to not only Slick Talk, but many of our originals and our other podcasts inside of the hospitality.fm ecosystem. So we talked, we made the deal. And of course, now we are using Send Squared for all of our podcasts, for email marketing, WhatsApp communication groups, and of course, customer support lines, and many, many other things. And I'm so excited because this is more than a CRM. Nick and Roy from Send Squared have built this company and this product from the ground up. And it's incredible. They have the mind of property managers first. They work with their customers and clients to make sure the new features and updates are constantly being added. And so it's just amazing to work with a team that's super excited about their product, about serving their clients and their customers, and seeing the industry grow. I got to see under the hood of some of the campaigns that go out via Send Squared, and there are a ton of property managers who are never relying on an OTA ever again based on their email marketing campaigns that generate over $1 million in booking revenue per month. Yes, $1 million per month. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I can't tell you how it has changed my approach in marketing and what we're doing in hospitality. So go ahead, sign up for Send Squared. There's going to be a link in the show notes. Thank you to the team over there for partnering with us. And of course, we're back to the episode. I love it. And you kind of hearing that statement, like I don't want to, I like certain things about the business. I don't want to be spending my time on other things. I put an operation team to take care of that. And the one of the things that just kind of goes through my head every time I hear someone, talk about it, and I'm guilty of saying it too, is like my mom, when growing up, she would always be like, well, sometimes you have to do stuff you don't like, and it's all, even if it's with even if it's like a job or a business that you love, there's still parts that we don't like, right? Like I hate editing my own show. I don't edit my own show anymore because I hated it. I was tired of it and was just like, all right, I'm done.
Right.
But I love creating the show. And so I guess for you, when do you know is it? Because like obviously when I hated editing or I hated a certain aspect of my business that I didn't want to do, I knew I'd have to hire for it. But how do you kind of judge yourself when it's time to actually open up that seat for somebody else to step into versus taking the control until it's actually fully ready for someone to actually have a job or a position that's perfect for the bigger vision that you're building?
Yeah, I think it's kind of twofold. I think the first thing is oftentimes doing things we don't like to do, we may discover that we actually like it. There may be kind of a fear of the unknown behind some of that. And so like for me, like public speaking, like I used to do public speaking a lot. And all of a sudden I got this block recently around public speaking. And I realized when I get into the groove, I actually love public speaking, but I've avoided it recently for some weird reason. And so I think that's a big part of like, if you're going to run a company, you better be a decent public speaker. So that's something that I've looked at it. I've gone, okay, well, what's the real issue behind it? When it's something I don't enjoy doing it, is there a fear behind it? Is there an apprehension, or does it just suck the energy out of me? If it's an apprehension, there's a high probability that it's something I need to press into. If there's like a fear behind it, I need to press into that because I may end up really enjoying it once I conquer that fear. So that's the first part, is understanding that. And then I think there comes a point where, in any business, you're going to have to wear hats that you don't want to wear. But the goal is to like evaluate your financial statements, your profit and loss, et cetera, and look at it and go, okay, what is it going to take within my revenue stream as I look at profitability and revenue to be able for me to eliminate this one thing that really sucks the energy out of me and I'm not good at it. And so every business is different. I think you have to evaluate that and go, okay, when can I create enough revenue where I could replace this thing that I don't do very well and will actually propel the business forward in a massive way? And I think that's different for everybody. I mean, every business is a little bit different. And just really knowing your numbers, knowing your financial statements and how those work is going to be a key element of deciding when that's possible. To me, again, it's twofold. It's what is the reason I don't like doing it, and really pressing into that. If it's just I'm not good at it and I know I can't do it long term, you have to have kind of an idea in your mind as you look at your finances of when the proper time is to make that pivot and to bring that person on.
So outside of the financial side, though, I'm curious. Like, okay, let's say the financials work, the numbers work, the money works. The reason behind why you want to offload it is not fear, or it's more of just a low energy suck. How do you know then, like, that time? Because obviously timing is important, but I guess the person that you're interviewing or trying to bring in is also going to be another crucial aspect. But maybe the question isn't when's the right time if all that's aligned. It's how do you know when that person is the right person?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of resources out there to determine that. Some of that, if you have the ability for the person to kind of strive the job a little bit. Like, so in financial services, to give you an example, when we're considering advisors who are coming into the fold, we'll actually have them do what we call market research. They'll do what's called a market opinion survey. They'll do 10 of those, and they'll talk to 5 people they know, 5 people that they've been introduced to, and just see how they're responding in that situation. So I think if you have tools like that where people can kind of test drive the job, as well as, things like DISC assessments, there's other tools called the Culture Index. Culture Index is great. It's not cheap, but Culture Index will help you really understand how somebody's wired and how well they'll align with the job itself. I think it's a combination of things. I mean, if you have the ability for them to kind of test drive the job, if you will, and you can kind of look at through assessments what they align well with, those assessments are usually pretty accurate. And a combination of those two things is usually going to give you a pretty good indicator if somebody's going to be effective at the job. I think, and I guess the third thing is, what other roles have they had in the past? And are they similar roles? And if they stayed in those roles for an extended period of time with some level of success or perceived success that they have, then that's a third element that I think is hugely helpful as you're evaluating somebody.
Yeah. I'm curious for you. You talked about starting your company right before COVID, not knowing obviously that we're all going to get a big slap in the face shortly into 2020. Where do you kind of begin, especially with your first venture, really on your own? I would love to know, where do you begin when it comes to the resources and research and understanding how business truly works? Because I know, thankfully, I've been so lucky to have guests on the show who had some kind of big corporate experience, working at Deloitte, or they were doing big, corporate environment type projects, or just careers, right? And so they get to see the inside of the industry or the business, right? They get to understand numbers and get taught of that, and a lot of them go to school for it, right? So, but the entrepreneurs that just have an idea and have an intuition, right, to start their own thing and just go for it, those are the ones that always kind of capture my attention a little bit more than the ones that were schooled or brought up in a corporate environment. And for you, obviously, you had years of kind of signs of all right, this is not for me. Corporate grind is just not for me, and building into it. So taking that leap, let's talk about that. Because I remember my leap and how scary it was and how I was just kind of flying by the seat of my pants sometimes and building the plane as they fly it, And so for you, what was the key resource or place of knowledge and depth or mentorship that you went to in order to get really started with your own company?
Man, candidly, you and I have talked a little bit about this. This is, my faith is important to me, and it's something I felt led to do. So very much it was this pull, it was this calling. I was at a point where I was going, okay, I'm jaded with the industry, and I was considering getting out of the industry because the fail rate is terrible. Oftentimes there's product pushing and, kind of a commission driven model, which is kind of a necessity of a lot of businesses. Just had a distaste in my mouth about it. And I was praying about it. And I felt like it was kind of this critical point of, you going to get out or you want to do something about the brokenness that you see in the industry? And for me, I just felt this pull to go in and press in and go, okay, I'm going to use the experience and the knowledge I have up to this point, and I have a drive to try and fix some brokenness that I see that exists. And that was it. I mean, I had a lot of mentorship, as an advisor, as a leader. I had a marketing company for a while, so it wasn't really my first endeavor. It's really my third. It's my first endeavor is, really owning my own financial services practice with my own brand on the door. Mm-hmm. But I had some other experiences that kind of gave me some confidence to do it. But I think really, man, I've talked to a lot of people on my podcast, and the common denominator is somebody sees a need, they think they have the ability to fix it or address the need, and they launch. And, some people do a lot more due diligence than others. Honestly, I didn't do a ton. It was gut, because I'm so vision driven that I was like, my gut tells me I need to do this. So I jumped in and I did it. Probably underfunded, undercapitalized, but I did it anyways, because that's just how I'm wired. I just felt a pull in my gut to do it. So there's nothing really super scientific about that, but that's how it was for me.
Well, you say the brokenness that you see in your industry or saw in your industry. Can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, man. There's always this inherent bias. I shouldn't say always. There's frequently an inherent bias built in. And it's not just in my industry. It's in any capacity. There's a bias built in. And so there's these different models, and there's different financial institutions that exist. Some are more insurance driven, some are more investment driven. And then you have the guys that say, well, I'm purely independent and I'm only fee based. So let's talk about the insurance model for instance. There are some really good insurance companies that really strive to be holistic. And then there's a bunch of insurance companies that say they're holistic, but the reality is they're just trying to push their product. They've got kind of a toolkit of widgets, and they're trying to push those widgets out. And it's evident, like you could feel it in the culture. Like they'll say they're holistic, but they're really just trying to push those insurance products. You go to the investment side of the equation, the big wirehouses of the world, they're kind of unashamed about it. Like they really only care about investment strategy. They've started to introduce some more tools. And I think that, the idea of being a fiduciary has come to the forefront in our industry and what it means to be a fiduciary. And in my mind, that's being a holistic advisor, no tools off the table. But you have to kind of look at where the profitability is driven in these different models. And if it's purely investment, purely insurance, there's a bias that exists there. And that doesn't necessarily benefit the client because the client needs both, right? They need somebody who's going to look at the whole picture and go, I need both of these. I need to know when it's the right tool for the right job. And then you have the fee-based guys that are out there, and God bless them. I love them. I know that they have the right heart, but you're biased towards the fee. You're biased towards charging a fee to spit out a plan. And so that bias, it's really hard to remove it. But so much of that is, I think, where the brokenness exists because clients feel that. All of a sudden, they feel that push towards, okay, you're trying to get me to buy something. And that's a hard thing to remove, but that's a big part of the brokenness. So that's on the consumer side. On the advisor side, the model has been broken because, advisors get into this business and the marketing plan is create a list of the 200 people that you know are closest to you, call on them, try and get introductions, and that's your marketing plan. And that's broken. And the reason I know it's broken is there's a 90% fail rate in the first 3 years. Like, all I have to do is look at the numbers and go, okay, that's broken. That doesn't work. And so, we've built a model where it's a multi-pronged marketing campaign and it's understanding who are you designed to serve. And I think this applies in any industry. Like you can't serve everybody. Figure out who you're designed to serve and who you have an affinity towards, who shares your core values, speaks the same language as you, the communities you've grown up in. Like understand that. And that's how we should build a marketing plan, is based on that, because there's going to be alignment and the probability of success goes up dramatically when you have alignment. You know who your target client is.
All right. Sorry. One more interruption before we continue into this episode, but Fido is one of our newest partners. Not only are they partnering with Slick Talk, they're also partnering with our other podcast, Good Morning Hospitality. So if you tune in there, you'll have already heard this, but you have to know Fido has the best bin to curb service for property managers just like you who can barely remember to take out their own trash bins to the curb on trash day. So as you're growing your property management company, adding 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 homes to your portfolio, that's a lot of trash to manage. And guess what? One of the biggest issues when it comes to regulatory issues in certain destinations, whether it's city or mountain or beach, is trash, parking, and noise. And guess what? Trash is actually a huge issue that comes to the ordinance and the regulation issues that go into these cities and destinations. So by partnering up with Fido, you're going to get a free month of their bin to curb service. And with that month, you're never going to go back because guess what? It's going to be on automated, autopilot, whatever you want to call it. And it's going to make your life and your owners' lives and your guests' lives so much easier. So grab the link in the show notes to get your free month of Fido. And now we're back to the episode. For sure. And I totally agree with you on the kind of biasy point of view and perspective, because even I'm a big believer in like, eat what you kill, right? Like if you crush and you're a great salesperson and you don't make it feel salesy and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you should earn whatever you earn. But I also think that model is kind of broken. And even in our industry, property managers or hoteliers, like everyone that I get to interact with on a daily basis always feels like it's just great. I got to walk through the vendor hall and get swarmed by all these freaking sharks, right? Like it's a shark fest. And it just feels so metric driven, and there's lack of actually understanding the person's business or their problems they're trying to solve, or the problems inside their business as they're solving other things, right? Like no one really takes the time. And this is a message to all the vendors listening. Stop selling like that. But it's more of such a big turnoff, and you wonder why so many companies, like you say, don't have success. They turn over so quick, or they have to make all these pivots, and then everyone's confused on what the company is anymore because they pivoted so many dang times that it becomes kind of just a vicious cycle of unproductivity, and just no one likes feeling that way. So what do you think in the sense of like culture and business model can companies look at, especially because you get to talk to a bunch of entrepreneurs just like I do on your show and through your guys' clients and the company and the work that you guys are doing and building. So like, what are things that business owners can do to instill a better culture or better processes? How do we change the broken sales model of this icky feeling that clients can feel when, obviously like they're just pushing a product, pushing a fee, or pushing a bias that they have to kind of push, to be honest.
Yeah, man, I wrote something on my whiteboard probably about a month and a half ago, and what it is it says focus on people and impact more and less on metrics. So focus more on people and impact, less on metrics. We got to know the score for sure. We need to know our numbers. We absolutely should. Reality is I tend to focus on tasks and metrics, and all of a sudden people start to feel like an inconvenience, and that's bad. Like we should be focusing on relationship, because if we are and we care about people, whether it's the client, it's the person that works for our business, whatever the case may be, if we have a heart to really care for that person and extend kindness and a genuine care and concern for that person, in many cases the money takes care of itself. It's not, you can't just run around and do that and not pay attention to your metrics. But I think there's always such a focus only on the metrics that we have to have that people-focused mindset that like we're trying to help other humans get where they want to go. And if we can help them get where they want to go, chances are we get what we want in the process. Like there's a very old book out there. Gosh dang it, I just totally forgot the name. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Very old book. But he talks about this mindset that if you give people what they want, you focus on them first, you will find the success that you want. And so that's old school. And maybe we need to kind of go back to some of those old school roots. And maybe some people would argue old school was like you work in a factory and you grind and nobody gives a rip about you. But Dale Carnegie was very successful. And so I think that his mindset is applicable even today.
100%. My friends and I actually read that book quite often, just because it has a great kind of center of like back to the basics, right? Like back to service, back to actually bringing value. And I know that word gets thrown around so many times on other podcasts and seminars and speaking engagements, right? You hear people like bring value, and you're like, what does that mean? Like, what does value mean?
Right.
But like really, it truly just means like aligning yourself with them. I think you kind of just meeting them at their level as much as you can. Empathy, being able to sit yourself in their shoes, well,
I think taking it a step further, it's understanding what's important to them, validating and confirming what's important to them, and using that as our compass to move forward. So like when we're doing planning with somebody, the kind of the mission and vision of, call it the entity that we're serving, which is the person that we're serving, we got to understand what are your goals and concerns. And every conversation should start there. What are your goals and concerns? Have they changed? Do we need to modify them? Is something moved up in priority? Do we already take care of something? Let's make sure that we start there. And if we anchor back to that, and that's our true north, whether it's in hospitality, doing what we do, whether it's us serving advisors, in the hospitality industry, serving your people that are on your team, it's what are you trying to accomplish? And if I can help you get there, then everybody wins. And that's, to me, that's value. That's value, right?
Yeah. No, that's great. So. That's a great answer for it. I want to ask you this question because as we're, changing our business and scaling and doing different things, I bring in some different consultants, right? And they're like one of the examples I can use right now is our SEO and website. Shout out to Jessie. She's killing it for us. And she keeps asking me the question as we're bringing up like the newsletter and email campaigns and CRMs and all the marketing kind of pieces that go into behind the scenes. She asked me the question, is like, all right, who's the audience? Like, what's the goal? I'm like, well, we have 3 audiences. So like, what one do you want to know? And she's like, well, what are the 3? And we went through this whole process. And at the end of the day, I felt like, I don't even know who my audience is. But but there are multiple. So I guess for you, when you're working, like, there's a bigger question I'm trying to get to in the sense of, I think I know what my audience, and I think I know what the kind of core accomplishment is, right? When I want to send out newsletters and campaigns and all that stuff. But going through the process, I actually find out I don't know what that goal is. I don't know what that accomplishment is. So when you guys are working with business owners or just overall clientele in general, going through that process, do you see the same thing? Like, they think they know what the accomplishment is or the goal that they're trying to achieve, but as you go through the process, it actually ends up being something completely different. As you go through.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when we think of goals, again, we anchor back to metrics and we think of a number.
Sure.
And I say, okay, so what are your goals? I'll go, I want to retire at 65 and I want to make X amount of money and blah, 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 blah. And part of our presentation is this conversation around goals are not numbers and no numbers are not goals. Now, the numbers, the metrics support the goal, but like the example I use, for instance, is, okay, I had a goal at one point to lose 15 pounds. And I started to look at it. I'm like, why do I want to do that? And I look back on the two 14ers I climbed with my daughter this past summer. And I realized if I was like 15 pounds lighter, then I could have climbed like more 14ers. It would have been a more enjoyable experience with my daughter. So really the goal is enjoying quality time with my daughter. The metric to help me accomplish that goal is lose 15 pounds, get lean, do lots of cardio, make sure your lungs are in shape, like blah, 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 blah. I have this task list underneath that. But let's get to that visceral, emotional goal, because when we can we're emotional people. Like if we can get excited about a goal, there's nothing exciting about, I'm going to retire at 65 and I'm going to have $150,000 a year. That's going to be so exciting. Well, no, why? Why is that important? Like, because I want to go see my grandkids whenever I want. I want to travel twice a year with my wife and go amazing places. Like, let's get to that visceral reason if you can. And I think that applies in so many facets of business. Like, if anytime I can get an owner, an entrepreneur, founder excited about their vision, dude, we're cooking with gasoline again. We're in the, like, we do have to get in the mundane and talk about the metrics and all that stuff. But if I can get them excited about what they're doing and where they want to go, then we're connecting at a different level.
How do you help them find that out? Because I'm the same way. I'm a visionary. I'm like you. I see the big picture, but I actually don't. If you ask me that same question, right? Like, why do you want to lose 15 pounds? Well, I don't know. So I could be healthier on those 14ers. I would have never thought about like the daughter situation, right? Like I would have been like,
right.
But well, like, how do you get to that subconscious? Yeah.
Go ahead. So I read a book. I think it's called The Coaching Habit. And this book is all about continuing dig, question after question. One of the big things he says is, what else? What else? What else? And you keep asking that. You distill that down until you have the real answer. Because in many cases, the first answer is not the real answer. And so it's helping people slow down, distill it down, keep asking probing questions, and stay curious. One of the things I love about the podcasting world is the podcasters who are the most successful are the ones who are the most curious. They are the ones who really want to know the story behind the story. They don't just take the surface level stuff and go, oh, that's awesome. They keep digging like you're doing. You keep digging and digging and digging until you get to the real core answer. And it takes patience and it takes a genuine curiosity. And when we're in that space, dude, everybody wins because we're getting to the real thing. And this, I mean, again, I think this applies to so many facets of life. So like over the years, I've worked with people who battle addiction, for instance, because I battled addiction. And when I get to the core of the addiction, it's almost never, the dopamine rush is one thing, right? So people have an addiction. It's usually because, there's a dopamine rush attached to it. But when you really start digging to the bottom of the addiction, there's a much deeper reason behind addiction. And in many cases, it's how we feel about ourselves. And it's a situation that happened when we were younger. And it's we have to get to those things, or we never really get to the root, the core of what motivates people. It's just not as effective.
Can I ask you, just to go down the personal route, what makes you kind of tick and drive and motivate you to continue to do what you do, to drive forward, to be the visionary? Like, do you have that end goal? What is your kind of accomplishment that you want to achieve at the end of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? What's that situation look like for you?
So I want to create, so I'm not going to use metrics. I will back into metrics, but I want to create because I almost threw the metric out there as soon as you asked me that. But my vision is to create something that far lasts beyond me. Like I want to create a multi-generational financial services firm that impacts people nationally and continues to adjust and adapt to the economics that exist. Again, pointing back to my faith, the vision that I got was to, and this is a disruptive mindset, use the system against itself. Because the reality is in our industry, people are captive in a lot of situations. The banking industry and debt specifically has made people slaves to that debt. And my vision is to set people free from that, to be able to use the system, use the tools against themselves for the benefit of the people that I serve, ultimately putting them on a path to live beyond money, where money is a tool. It's not their God. It's a tool that they can use. But ultimately, I want people to be able to live out a calling. And so the thing that gives me the most energy is not when I get a client to get an amazing return in their portfolio. I like that. It feels good. But it's even better when they come to me with a goal that feels so outside of the purview of just normal returns in a portfolio, protecting my family if something happens to me. They're like, we have this, like I have a client right now. I have this dream. I want to have a second home and it's got a biking track on it. We want to be able to invite people onto the property. We want to grow our own food. Like I hear people talking like that. I'm like, that is what gives me energy, is to be able to help somebody fulfill that thing that's so outside of what our industry would normally do. So I don't know if that kind of paints a picture, but my vision is to be able to create a firm that does that for advisors and all the people that we serve.
All right, Slick Talkers, how do I integrate a property management platform into an episode that barely talks about hospitality today? Well, you do a little ad break. And this ad break is brought to you by our friends at Hostfully, because Hostfully is the #1 property management platform for operators just like you who are trying to grow their business. So if you are just starting out, 0, 1, 5, 15, 20 properties under your portfolio and management, well, Hostfully is going to be great for you, and they're going to be great for you as you continue to scale. They have an amazing marketplace for you to add other technology vendors into the ecosystem to ensure great connectivity. And let's be honest, their channel connections are top notch in the industry, where connections with Airbnb, Booking.com, Expedia, even Marriott Homes and Villas is a big channel for them. And they have been known for building great connectivity so that way your business never has delays when it comes to the things that matter most: reservations, occupancy, and taking care of your guests. So thank you to Hostfully for partnering with us for the last 4 years. We love working with you guys. And if you are a listener of the pod, you can grab a special discount right below in the show notes. Let them know that Will sent you, and they're going to take great care of you. So thank you to Hostfully. And now we're back to the episode. I love that. How do you reverse engineer something like that? Because that's what I was like, I get challenged by like my own mentors and advisors that are like, okay, what's the end goal? Okay, the end goal is blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's reverse engineer it. How do you do you have a process that goes that way? Or is it just truly showing up each day and just trying to find that opportunity when you're working with someone currently or like a new prospect? Or kind of like, how do you make sure that you're heading towards that?
So I think I have to look at what moves the needle financially. I mean, unfortunately, there are metrics, or fortunately, there are metrics attached to that. So I know, okay, if I have conversations with this many strategic allies, I'm able to get this many business owners, I'm able to get, I have to kind of back into the different metrics that I know. Because for instance, one of my goals, and I'm going to share this, it's freaking crazy, but I want to have 1,000 advisors, which I don't know of any firm unless they're a wirehouse that has that. And people will say I'm crazy, but I'm going to keep telling the crazy story. And then I have to back into that. I have to go, okay, how many advisors do I need to have to hire in a lifetime? Is this going to be something that has to happen beyond my lifetime? Because maybe that's not a reasonable goal. And it is definitely a bit unreasonable, especially if I'm going to work for even the next 20 years. 1,000 is a big goal. And so understanding what has to happen to get there and what activities I should be doing and activities I should not be doing. Because if I'm operating and doing things that aren't driving revenue, aren't driving new advisors to the team, aren't driving new conversations, I have to check that. And then you have to back into the numbers and the metrics from there. And I'm leaning on industry experience definitely around what those metrics look like and like what conversion ratios look like. I still pull from that data against kind of and through the lens pointing to that vision that I have of what I want to build.
I love that. I also want to kind of shift topics a little bit due to our pre-chat. Kind of like my listeners know, every guest before they join the show, unless they're a repeat guest, we do a pre-chat and discuss topics, passions, everything. We kind of just do what we do here, just a little less organized and maybe a little more chaotic. But I want to talk about the human connection in the workplace, because one of the things you kind of mentioned is like rehumanizing the workplace. And so I want to ask you, like, why do you believe rehumanizing the workplace is vital, and what practices do you recommend for fostering empathy and connection amongst team members?
So the first thing I'm going to point to a metric I keep talking about, kind of bouncing back and forth. The metric is you spend a third of your life working. So you better, like, hopefully you love what you do, and hopefully we have a culture and an environment where you love to show up. You love the environment that exists. And there's a book out there. It's called Completing Capitalism. It's kind of a cerebral book. It's about this idea of human capital, which I don't necessarily like that term, but I understand the idea behind it, and how truly important your people are to your organization. I mean, they truly are the greatest asset of the business. Like, without people, nothing works. I mean, even with the emergence of AI and some of the things that are happening.
I was just going to ask you that. I was like, what about AI?
Yeah, I mean, that's real. And there's always been innovation and changes, and AI is not going to be last of it. Like, I mean, I don't want to point back to a bunch of things that have happened over time, but everyone's like, well, eventually nobody's going to buy copiers and scanners anymore. Well, guess what? There are plenty of companies out there that are still selling all-in-one copiers for offices. They still are used. It's just changed. And so the thing that doesn't change is there's still going to be a human element to the capacity of what they're going to actually do. There's always going to be a human element, because people are hungry for relationship and companionship. And I think one of the things that came out in our conversation is COVID like highlighted that. It brought out the best of people and it brought out the worst in people. But one of the things that I recognize, and I think many other people that I talk to recognize, is the power of human connection is so important. Like, we were created for connection. And if we're not connecting well with our people, and they're just another number, it's kind of like in my business, that they just feel like, hey, I'm just trying to give you the best return possible, but I'm never engaging you as a person. I think especially these younger generations are realizing that to be valued as a person, as if they're uniquely designed, is going to be important. I think you asked a question about how do you engage in empathy.
Yeah, I know that could be like a tough one, just due to the fact of, like, trying to keep a professional and personal relationship fine line, I guess, right? Like, you want to be relatable, you want to be close, you want to be able to be like, my team tells me when stuff is going on in their lives, right? And want to make sure that I'm, one, hearing them as a human, but two, like, keeping that boundary as a boss where I'm not oversharing or overreaching or, asking too many details or asking for too many details, right? So yeah, I guess that, like, I don't know, for me, it's always kind of a fine line to balance.
Yeah, man, I will tell you, I'm not, believe it or not, not a naturally empathetic person. It's something that I've had to learn. I know I do have a heart for people. I want the best for people. That's not in everybody. So it's not like you can force yourself necessarily to be empathetic. But I think for me, the best way for me to do it is to try and walk in somebody else's shoes. Like, there's an old Everlast song where he talks about that. Everlast is the guy from House of Pain. And now I'm aging myself. And he talks about it in his song about, like, let's just pause it and walk in somebody else's shoes for just a minute. And when we do that, it humanizes people and it changes the way that we make decisions. Sometimes it's hard because we may not have the entire backstory and we don't want to overpry, but if people are sharing their backstory with us, that is something that we should treat with kid gloves. Like, we should take that very seriously and realize that they confided in us. And we take that seriously. We take our relationship with them seriously, because it's going to happen. Unless you're in an environment that's just completely stoic, which those environments exist, it's going to happen. And if we can walk in their shoes for just a minute, like Chick-fil-A, they have some of the best training out there. I mean, no matter where you go, Chick-fil-A's are always going to be busy. And the way they train their people is really powerful and profound. And they talk about that. There's actually I've seen it. It's like an image of people and they're all standing in line and there's like kind of these bubbles above their head with a little bit about their story. Like, I just lost my dad. I'm going through a terrible divorce. My son's in drugs right now, whatever. Like it's all these different things. And they are trying to humanize the customer because sometimes customers have a bad day. Sometimes people on your team have a bad day and they're going to show up a certain way and you're going to be like, why is that person such an a-hole? And if we can take a step back and go, man, I've showed up being an a-hole some days. Like, let me give them the benefit of the doubt. Let me try and understand their story to the extent that they're comfortable sharing it. If they're not, at least you have an open door and you're expressing a genuine care for people. There's definitely an art to saying, look, I don't want to overstep my bounds. I don't want to pry, but just know that the door is always open. And if there's ever resources that I can provide to help you with X, Y, Z, I want to do that. And if you're genuine about that, I think that's a sticky culture. People want to be a part of that.
Yeah, I've been asking the question a lot lately on like, what makes a product or even a company sticky? I've asked, I got to talk to Jasmine Siegela, who has this company that basically makes hotel and hospitality technology with operators through a algorithm that her and her team developed, and really cool stuff, really nerdy things, all hospitality related. But it was so much fun because talking about, the kind of technology turn that we see in our industry where operators sign up for a product, use it for a little bit, maybe use it at half capacity or less, end up not liking it because they're not using it to its fullest capabilities. So they dump it and then they move on to another one, and it's just an endless cycle. And I asked the question of like, does that mean that we just haven't created sticky products? Like we haven't created a product so good that people want to use it no matter what? Like it's kind of like, once you become an iPhone or an Android person, you can't really leave that environment. You're like, okay, I'm now one of those people that, or like if you have a certain app or a tool or a product at your own home that you just love using, that's a sticky product. So I guess for you, do you have like a key like indicator of what makes a sticky culture outside of like empathy is an important one? I think that's super crucial, but does the product have to be good? Does the, the time outside of work, like what makes a work culture sticky to you?
I think it's intention, purely intention. And so you and I had a conversation. This isn't about a work culture from an attraction standpoint, but it's an example because we were talking about hospitality and I told you about how I traveled and I was down in the Palm Beach area. We actually rented an Airbnb down in the Palm Beach area. And from the minute I booked all the way through the time I left, there were personal touches everywhere along the way that were impressive. And it created an impression in my brain. And I was like, oh my gosh, like initially they responded. The guy that owned the property sent me a message. Then he had somebody on his team that was in charge of like the cleaning services and like making sure everything we had everything we needed in the unit. That person followed up. We had a situation where something wasn't working quite right in the unit. He responded. Then he had another person respond. When we got there was a gift basket with a handwritten card. Like, I don't know how much, it probably didn't cost that much to do something like that. But that extra personal touch, I think it applies not only to the customer experience, but it applies to the experience with the people that are on our team. And if we are intentional about it, we're paying attention to the things they tell us are important to them, and we're engaging in those things that they say are important to them, that's a sticky culture because they feel like a human. They feel valued because you paid attention. You paid attention to the fact that they just lost their dad. You paid attention to the anniversary, their third anniversary that was so important to, whatever it is, their kid's baseball game, if we can pay attention to that and acknowledge and celebrate alongside people, that becomes very sticky. But we have to be intentional about it.
That's so good. That's so good. And it goes into the next question I wanted to ask you around, overall mindset, because I think intentionality, right? Like you mentioned how important that is. And I think that takes a certain mindset to really start to build, unless you're just naturally wired to really care and put others first, right? We all have that one person. And I think anyone listening could be like, oh, I know that one person in my life who is just always so intentional. But the rest of us, it's so hard because you have to put yourself aside and really look at what's happening around you. And that's observation, that's intentionality, that's a lot of things. But overcoming mindset challenges, I kind of want to go into with you because you also brought this up on our pre-chat, and you and I've had conversations over coffee as well. But like, why is overcoming shame and addressing mindset hurdles essential for not just entrepreneurs, but I think for even leaders inside of a company that could be more startup focused or even well established? And what strategies have you found to be most effective with that?
Well, man, that's a big question. So starting with shame, shame is something I encounter every day, personally, and with the people I talk to around their money. I don't care how much money somebody's making. There's almost always an underlying shame issue around, I should have done this. They feel, they're exposed when we start talking about stuff. And I'm like, listen, there's no
Guilty.
shame. Let's pull that out of it. Yeah. I mean, everybody, I know we had a conversation recently where I heard it and I was like, dude, you are where you are. Let's just start where you are. You don't need to justify and so, helping people realize that they don't need to justify and giving them permission to be with where they are creates a vulnerability that is powerful. And it shifts a mindset. Like it gives them permission to live unhindered. Shame is so hindering. In my opinion, it's the difference between guilt. Shame is guilt is I've done something wrong. Shame is I'm wrong or I'm bad. And there's a big difference there. And so for me, I've had to really learn from a mindset perspective to separate the two. And when somebody's giving me information around maybe a disappointment that they have with me or whatever it is, I've learned to go, okay, this is just information. This is not a judgment against me. I'm not going to take it as a judgment against me unless somebody's giving me clear indication that it's a judgment against me. Because we quickly jump to making stories up that this is a judgment against me. And if we can take a step back and just go, okay, this is information. I should be thankful for the information because it's going to help me become a better version of myself today and going forward. It's being able to just go, it's just information instead of I'm immediately bad. And so a big part of that for me, is our thought life, like being able to get control of our thought life and go, okay, I have this really crappy feeling right now going on. What is that? Is it shame? Is it fear? Is it guilt? Is it I feel less than? By the way, those are common for just about everybody. Like I've gone through a process recently where I wrote down the top 10 lies I'm telling myself. Oof. And then what I did is I wrote affirmations to the contrary of all those things and I recorded them. I listened to them every day. And it sounds cheesy. I roll my eyes a lot of times when I'm doing it, but hearing myself tell myself a different story than I'm not enough. Or like I have a lie that I tell myself, people are kind to me because they want something from me. Like I have story after story, lies that I'm telling myself. And I've had to as I've started to replace those, all of a sudden I could pivot out of a negative emotion or feeling that I had because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm telling myself this story. How do I pivot out of that? How do I tell myself something different? Because if we have these stories and all this noise going on in our brain, we're burning through a bunch of energy and we're not showing up as our best selves. So I think it's personal responsibility to take a step back, realize that everybody is a victim of some kind of trauma. But now what? What are you going to do knowing that trauma? What happened? How are you going to address it? Because there are lots of tools out there to be able to address it. From coaches to books to what, a tool I just gave you. There's really no excuse. Like figure out how you can overcome that trauma because everybody has it.
Yeah, that's really good. And I actually just hired a speaking coach. And one of the first sessions that we did was going into affirmations because I've been telling myself, even though I've been podcasting full time for 7 years, that I'm not a good speaker in public. I'm not articulate. I don't know how to form a full thought. And then the first session that I had to go through with him was actually not even with him. It was by myself, writing down the lies that I tell myself and reaffirming that is not true. And then speaking them out loud and looking at myself in there. I didn't record it and listen to it. I just had to look at myself in the mirror and say, for a week long straight, right? You are articulate. You know how to form a thought. You can actually you are curious enough to go down that route, right? It's a whole thing, right? And so I totally love that. And this kind of ties into another question I wanted to ask you based on our pre-chat was supporting honest conversations with yourself or even within the company. And I guess I want to ask you is what steps can leaders take to create an open environment that encourages discussion about mindset and emotional well-being and all the things that you and I just tackled?
Well, I think it's being vulnerable and being human with your people. at some level as appropriate. So it's been my experience that when I share my vulnerabilities with people and I talk to them about how what I'm doing to combat and overcome those things, which is a multitude of things, it helps them realize they're not alone. Because I think people feel alone in whatever is going on in their mindset, and they don't feel like they have a safe place to talk through it. But when we open the door and we're vulnerable and we're real about our own struggles, it humanizes us and it opens the door for them to do the same. So that's been where I've seen the greatest success over the years is just being real about where my struggles are. Because I think, especially men, guys growing up, it's like, I got to be tough. I got to have it all together. I got to have the answer to every problem. And man, that's a heavy burden. Like that just pummels you into the ground. And don't get me wrong, like there's something to be said about just sometimes you got to pull your bootstraps up and have some grit. But let's also be real about when we're struggling with stuff and have people that we can talk to about that so that we can overcome it. Because we're just like turning it in our brain. It never gets better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had the opposite. I had 5 sisters growing up, so I was always the more emotional, the more talkative, right? Like it was all that, no concealment. And I remember like through high school, a lot of my guy friends, very few, because I was more comfortable around women and still am today. But it was like always kind of frowned upon to be like vulnerable and open and thoughtful around like how you're feeling or why you're feeling certain things. And then I would be like always wondering like, why do I have more girl friends than I do anybody else? And it became like actually a negative thing because then I went the other way growing up and I was like, okay, I'm not going to I need to be more manly. I went through the military and I have to, bubble up. So I totally feel that what you're saying with that. And it's really good. Shane, I kind of want to just close this out in the sense of, we're going into a crazy year. We've had, I don't think a lot of people maybe listening today had the best 2024, right? Business has been hard this year for a lot of people. Sure. At least that's what I'm hearing. Maybe some people aren't going to be vulnerable to admit it out loud, but I'll be the first to say, 2024 was tough. And I know 2025 has a more positive outlook, and I think everyone's just ready to get onto this new chapter of life. And I hate wishing time away, but I think it's kind of like we survived 2024. We want to thrive in 2025. Where do you think like leaders today that are listening, no matter what business or industry they're in, can really start to focus in on? I know like intentionality for me would probably be the big takeaway from our conversation. I think that's super important, and being more intentional outside of like the goals and metrics, but more about the people and the vision. But like, what would you suggest that entrepreneurs start looking at? What do you see with your guys' clients that are experiencing shame and trying to get on the other side, or, like all this opposite stuff, right? Like, what is the big thing that you would love to leave people with today?
Man, I know that the embracing your why thing has been overused in recent years, but it's very applicable. You just talk about a conference I was at this week, and I admitted in front of a group of my peers that I had kind of abandoned the dream because the last actually 2 years have been not the way I wanted them to turn out. Yeah. And it was something broke when I actually spoke out loud that I had abandoned the dream. I had gotten so wrapped up in the daily grind, which is on me. I'm like, okay, I'm allowing my calendar to run me. I've got to change that. And so like going forward for me intentionally on Friday afternoons, I'm going to look back on the week and not in a shameful way, but go, okay, what did this week look like? How does that align with the vision or not align with the vision? What are the things like, let me reinvigorate the vision. What is it that I'm seeking after to build in this company? And if we don't regularly come back and revisit that and then evaluate, is there alignment with that or not? I think that's how we get off path. 24 was a weird year. I mean, there's a lot of reasons it was weird. Inflation's through the roof. People ran up credit card debt, spent a lot of their savings. Like it's a tough year. I mean, a lot of people are kind of pausing. They're getting slow paid by vendors. I mean, I've heard all kinds of stories. It was definitely a tough year. Okay, but now what? Now we have to go, okay, what's 25 going to look like? What am I optimistic about? What's that vision that gets me fired up and excited? And how can I intentionally, regularly engage that vision? Because in a lot of ways that can squash the shame. Like you're just like, you have to constantly remember the vision because I'm going to get pummeled from one day to the next sometimes. And how am I going to re-engage that vision and keep it in front of me and have people around me? Maybe it's giving permission to people that are in your inner circle. If you don't have one, you need to create one. of people that are asking you, how's it going with your vision? Having people around you, or asking very pointed questions about the vision, I think those things, for me, that's my plan rolling into 25, is to be intentional on Fridays, to put the vision out there, to reinvigorate it, have people around me that are going to question me on it. And hopefully that helps 25 be better 24.
I love it. I love it. Well, Shane, the last question, as always, for all the listeners, as they know, what is the destination you would like people to go to check out more, to learn more about you, to connect with you? It could be LinkedIn. It could be an email. It could be your website. It could be anything you want. Where's the number one destination people should go if they want to, connect and reach out?
Well, it kind of depends how they engage. So I'll give you 3. If you want to go to risewealth.org, I think we have a pretty good website. I'm always wanting to make it better. That's just kind of the refiner in me. If you hit me up on LinkedIn, you're going to find me pretty easily. And if you want to some more insight into, conversations with business owners, the podcast is great, building the business out on every major podcast platform. And I think those are the 3 best ways to kind of get a good picture of who I am and how I'm wired. So thank you for the opportunity to share that.
Of course. And for the listeners, I said in the beginning, I was a guest on Shane's podcast. I will be linking not only the podcast, but that episode, so that way you guys can hear the conversation we had. I really enjoyed it. It was actually one of many that you and I have had since. So it's really, really fun I love the podcast medium, as you know. And it was really cool honor to be on your show. So thank you for joining me on mine. And for the listeners, I hope you guys enjoyed this new age type episode where we're not just focusing on hospitality, but we're focusing in more on business, on entrepreneurship. It's an exciting topic as I have many interests outside of hospitality, and I know you guys do too. So Shane, thank you for helping me break the seal with changing the format a little bit on the show after 7 years of not. But it's such a fun episode, and thank you so much again for taking the time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I hope people see the buzzword value in that conversation that we had today. That is great. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. Me too. All right, Slick Talkers. So grab the links in the show notes. You know exactly what to do. Show Shane the same love and support you show me every week so we can keep producing these amazing episodes. And if you like this episode, let us know. Like and subscribe. Share with your friends. And of course, like always, we'll see you guys again next week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.
Shane Bauman is a registered representative and financial advisor of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, PASS. Securities products and advisory services offered through PASS member FINRA SIPC. Financial representative of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. PASS is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Rise is not an affiliate or subsidiary of PASS or Guardian. This podcast is for informational purposes only. The host and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by PASS, Guardian, or Rise, and opinions stated are their own. Guardian, its subsidiaries, agents, and employees do not provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Consult your tax, legal, or accounting professional regarding your individual situation. 754-7852.1 expires 1/27.